enjoyed the late Italian summer sun in the vicinity of Salerno just weeks or days before the Allied landings there. The late model LH-18s mounted a muzzle brake to permit the gun to fire shells of greater power and range. 105mm batteries were employed in ever heavier firefights between the midsummer of 1943 and war's end on the Eastern Front. Desperate attempts by the Germans to hold back the ever-growing Soviet offensive tide saw them in continual use from the Ukraine through to the outskirts of Leningrad. By late 1944, the Germans had been pushed back into Poland and East Prussia. The 105mm light howitzer saw service literally up to war's end. The backbone of the German medium artillery formations throughout the war was the 15cm Schwer field howitzer, or SFH-18. It was developed and produced in parallel with the heavy 10cm cannon, which employed the same carriage but is distinguishable by its shorter barrel. Both weapons were developed by Rheinmetall and Krupp in the late 1920s for the Reichswehr and entered service in the period 1933-34. However, the army became rapidly disillusioned with the 10cm weapon and focused upon the 15cm caliber, which saw service throughout the war. Another version of the same caliber, known as the FH-36, was ordered by the army as early as 1935, and this was distinguished by being lighter, as it used alloys in the place of steel in some parts of the carriage. The distinguishing feature of this model is the muzzle brake. With the onset of war and the allocation of most metal alloys to aircraft manufacture, the production of the FH-36 was limited and discontinued in 1942. The 15cm SFH-18 is seen in almost all films shot of the German army at war, from the first to the last days of the conflict. It was transported by horse and also moved in the advanced echelons of the army by being towed behind an 8-ton half-track. These seen in action here are involved in the first months of Operation Barbarossa. It was the ability to rapidly move heavy artillery and keep it in striking distance of the panzer spearheads that allowed advanced tank formations to call upon heavy artillery support when faced with obstacles it was unable to remove. Having such weapons close to the moving front was also discovered to be psychologically most effective. The performance of this 15cm gun was, as always, dependent upon the charge and shell type. The standard high-explosive shell weighed some 43.5 kilograms. When propelled by a single bagged charge, its range was some 4,000 yards. When employing the maximum charge, the gun's range was boosted to over 14,000 yards. Attempts to increase the range of this weapon even further saw the tentative introduction of the world's first rocket-boosted shell in 1941. It could only be employed on guns with muzzle brakes and had a theoretical maximum range of over 20,000 yards or 19,000 meters. It was not a success and withdrawn quite quickly. A very large number of different projectile types were developed for this weapon, including shells for employment against concrete emplacements, hollow charge shells and smoke shells. The German artillery arm suffered exceptionally heavy losses in the years 1941-42 during the course of the campaign in Russia. Many hundreds of these artillery pieces were lost in the retreat from Moscow and in the 1942 summer offensive, culminating in the defeat of 6th Army at Stalingrad. By the time of the Battle of Kursk in July 1943, the artillery arm was less well placed than the tank arm. Indeed, air power had to substitute for the lack of large numbers of German heavy artillery in this battle. By this date, it was also becoming apparent to the army that the Achilles heel of this weapon lay in its inability to be moved rapidly unless it was towed by a prime mover. Even then, the weather conditions in Russia were such that after rain or during the muddy season, even half-tracks found it difficult to tow such heavy guns, the 15cm weighing in at about 5.5 tons. In 1942, the decision had been taken to mount this gun on a fully tracked chassis to give it the desired mobility. The subsequent Hummel, or Bumblebee, employed a Panzer III-4 chassis to carry the gun in an open mount.